Welcome to another edition of Carnivore Bites. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman, along with Dr. Eric Lopkin. And this is a week that's hard to top. We've talked about this before. You know, like that old song says, riding high in April, shot down in May. I believe it was Mr.
Yeah.
Frank Sinatra, a living legend, or a legend at least, no longer living. Cuomo, we remember him going head to head, so to speak, in the same time frame when Trump is giving him his updates, and the liberal media couldn't get enough of him. They're gone. He's gone, and some real big ramifications involved in that, including his brother, Chris. Your comment to kick things off.
Yeah, it really is amazing. I mean, you went to Frank Sinatra. My first thought was The Wizard of Oz with Ding Dong, the Witch is Dead. But it took less than a year to go from Democratic darling to deposed and disgraced. And it just goes to show that the media was more interested in anti-Trump than the reality of the situation. This is a man who killed 15,000 senior citizens by putting them back in nursing homes because
and profited by it too, by writing a book.
Yes, profited by it.
People would be ashamed.
Profited by it through his book, all because he did not want to give Trump credit for having Javits Center and the hospital ship ready and waiting for New York City. So he put politics ahead, and now it's come back. People were saying he should be running for president. No, he should be out of office, out of the public eye, and done for.
And maybe prosecuted for the nursing home disaster.
That's still going forward. The AG's office has not said they are not going to prosecute even if he steps down. So there still can be criminal charges pending.
Yeah, and there also could be criminal charges involved with the molestations, if you will, or the groping incidents. Yep. Some of those are on its surface certainly illegal.
Yeah, the AG's report said specifically that Andrew Cuomo, aside from just the immorality of his behavior, broke both New York state and federal harassment laws. So they are looking at those criminal charges.
Now, didn't the liberal apparatus, including organizations like Time's Up, among others, didn't they really come to this kicking and screaming? And some of them are still silent about it, aren't they, Dr. Lopkin?
Yes. You know, when it was Trump, they were going
after the accusers.
Yes. When it was Trump, they were going after, all women have to be believed. When it was Kavanaugh, all women have to be believed. When it was Biden, she's not credible. When it was Cuomo, no, can't be. They were very specific about picking conservative targets that they would go after and defending liberals. And I have to tell you this, when all of this came down with Cuomo, my wife said to me, she goes, wait a minute, wasn't this all under a year of investigation? It's like, yeah, not quite a year they started investigating. And she goes, they've been investigating harassment charges against Trump for 5 years. They still haven't found anything.
No, interesting. Yeah, that's a good point your wife had. That's quite true. So his future's obviously gone when in the liberal arena, when they turn on their own, they're of no longer use to them. So, and I also think his genius brother, Chris, whose show is absolutely unwatchable. He would never have had that show if it wasn't for his brother. I think it's a good opportunity for CNN, even though they're completely inept, to get rid of a liability. Your comments?
Well, I think Chris Cuomo's career is over also. I'm going to disagree with you that he wouldn't have had the show if it weren't for his brother. He wouldn't have had the show if it weren't for his father.
Okay.
But But
no, that's true. The good point.
There's a possibility that Chris Cuomo may also have charges levied against him because he gave testimony to the AG where he said he was involved in crafting the response to the accused. He worked with his brother on making statements. So first of all, he may be guilty by association, and enabling his brother to get away with this harassment, which, by the way, under the criminal code, depending on how you read it, could make him just as liable. But also, it is incredibly unethical for a reporter, an anchor, to be doing this with a politician, relative or not.
Agreed. Well, hasn't CNN blurred that line, for years now, obviously, not even just starting with Trump, but before then. I mean, their credibility is almost, I would say, negligible at this point.
Well, talking about credibility, I don't know if you saw this. This is something else my wife brought up to me. There was a recent survey in 48 countries about how reliable their media was. We came in out of 48 countries, 48th.
That doesn't surprise me a bit. It's not without ramifications, because I think you said it when we were on terrestrial radio. It's very dangerous, actually, because I see it in my own social circle that people that are liberal are adamant about their, this and that happened, even though it may never ever happened, right? Russian collusion,
Yes.
Whatever the subject matter is, and conservatives do the same thing. We're not talking to each other, and I see friendships, relationships going on the fritz. It never happened before. People used to, it was actually good banter to talk politics over a beer. You got involved a little bit, but you walked away as friends. That may no longer happen. And I think some of it, not all of it, is because of the bias in the media on both sides to some degree.
Yes, I talked about the echo chamber. I mean, we literally started talking about it over 10 years ago, and it's only gotten worse. And part of the big problem is that, and it's partially the media, it's partially the education system. I am talking to people, and they're unfamiliar now with facts because the media is pushing their opinion as facts. The education system is not teaching science the way it should. They're not teaching history the way they should. So people don't have the background to question it. I mean, I've spoken to some liberals that I was absolutely flabbergasted because their comments had no basis in fact. And when you show them the facts, it's like, no, that didn't happen. It's like, yes, it did. And
I think your point is well taken. How it happened is obviously open to analysis, but you're right. People are becoming increasingly emotionally based and suffering a little bit on the fact situation. But yes, because I think it's also people become so basically, I think it's more about the media, more revved up about their side, and facts be gone. CNN, do they focus on facts, Dr. Lopkin? They're emotionally based. They're playing
CNN wouldn't.
Emotions.
CNN wouldn't know a fact if it bit them. But I think even more dangerous than CNN, MSNBC, and Fox is actually Facebook and Google, because people post things on Facebook that you can check very quickly and see it's a lie, but people treat it as gospel because somebody posted it on Facebook.
I think that's an excellent point. You're 100% correct that just because something is out there, people assume it has a degree of legitimacy. Speaking about social media, Rand Paul was, I believe, reprimanded, but also to some degree silenced. I don't know if it's permanent or or just a temporary. It's probably a temporary situation. But for his views on mask mandates, and he suggested that social media overall is becoming a arm of the government.
Well, we talked about this a few weeks ago. The Biden administration publicly admitted that they have been coordinating with Facebook on censoring information about COVID. And, in theory, they say, well, they just want the facts out there. But as you saw with Rand Paul, it's gone beyond that. And, and we've talked about masks for the last few weeks. We talked about it 2 weeks ago when YouTube pulled that episode of our podcast because they didn't want to listen to the truth. But, we were there. More and more people are talking about the fact that masks don't work. And here's the thing. Some masks work very well. N95, KN95, surgical masks. The bulk of the masks that you're picking up at Walmart, they don't work as well. And there is now actually a quick and easy test that you can do to tell if the mask you have is useful. And it's very simple. You put the mask on. Make sure your nose and mouth are completely covered. Then take a flower, an essential oil. You can also use aromatic herbs, anything that smells, and take a good whiff. If the smell of the flower or the herbs or the essential oil can be smelled from behind the mask, then the virus can get through it, because the way smell works is that molecules of that item travel into the olfactory senses. So if there's enough gaps in the mask to let that through, there's also enough gaps to let the virus through. So make sure, yes, masks can be effective if you have an effective mask.
Yes, I think overall it certainly beats not having masks. I actually think that the anti-vaccine people and anti-mask people, I think I blame Trump to some degree about politicizing those two areas of the focal points of the pandemic. I think, we have to protect ourselves any way possible. I think I think people should be educated to your point in terms of the effectiveness of it, because you're dealing with people's lives. I think masks are a good first line of defense, but I'm sure some of the masks I put on probably weren't effective at all. I think it's a good public service to tell people because the whole point of it is to stop transmission, correct? I think it's a good public service, and I'm surprised more information isn't out there about the various effectiveness of masks.
No, because they don't want any information getting out that might be possibly confusing. They want to make it black and white. Let's face it, the real world is not black and white. And by the way, the bulk of the masks that are out there that you get in the stores, these came out because, if you remember, at the beginning of COVID, there was a shortage of the N95 masks. There is no shortage anymore. You can go on Amazon and get N95 masks. So you can get these more effective masks.
Okay, continuing on the virus, the pandemic. I'm very, very worried, actually, because I think we may be going into another lockdown phase. There's word that the Pfizer vaccine is only 42% effective against the Delta variant. Troubling news, Dr. Lopkin. In fact, I think Hawaii is in the midst of putting together another lockdown. I'm sure other states are as well.
Well, again, it's a case of people's reactions getting ahead of the science. We've talked about this on this podcast. This has actually been all over the news. The fact that the Delta variant, while a lot more contagious than the original COVID virus, is a lot less dangerous. So, the Pfizer vaccine may be only, 42% effective in preventing the Delta variant, but it is effective in minimizing the symptoms and minimizing the seriousness of it. It in itself is less serious than the original. So, everybody's
But it is
yelling,
food for thought, Doctor. It is food for thought that, we have one variant, you have all these people that aren't vaccinated. Essentially, it's a petri dish for another variant to raise its ugly head.
Okay, no,
again,
hang on. I gotta stop you there, because that's a common misnomer that's being repeated over and over again. The lack of a vaccination is not what causes variants. Viruses mutate by themselves because a virus, I hate to use the word want because it doesn't have conscious thought, but the virus is trying to do everything it can to survive. The only way to keep a virus from mutating is to completely kill it out of existence. No vaccine is doing that.
Okay, but I understand that. But if you have a group of the population that's unvaccinated, they're host to this virus and gives it an opportunity to morph, create other variants. If everyone was vaccinated, at least theoretically, it would have no place to hide.
Again, that's not the case. I know a lot of vaccinated people who have gotten the Delta variant. The Delta variant can be caught even if you're vaccinated. Being vaccinated gives you a lot more of immunity against it. So even if you have it, it's not going to be serious. It's not even going to be as serious as, it's certainly not going to be as serious as unvaccinated. So yes, you want more people to be vaccinated. And by the way, speaking of vaccinations, an interesting poll came out that 30% of the people that are not vaccinated are waiting for the FDA to completely approve the vaccines. Remember, the vaccines are currently being used under emergency conditions. The FDA has not officially approved them. 30% of the people who are not vaccinated are waiting for that approval. The FDA has had all of the information they need to approve it since May. Biden has not even nominated a chair of the FDA. So the Biden administration is literally holding back this approval.
Okay, if this was Trump, and you're correct about he has not appointed anyone, what do you think CNN's number one story would be tonight?
If Trump had done this, they'd have been attacking him day after day after day. And you know what? They would have been right to. Agreed. They should be going after Biden for this. The FDA in the middle of a pandemic to be operating without leadership is ridiculous.
Yes, so moving on to obviously something big in the news is the infrastructure bill that was passed. I believe 8 Republicans. I'm not completely correct on the number, but I think it's more or less the usual suspects. Just came out today or yesterday that the national debt, obviously I think it's really more than this, is now up to $29 trillion. I am dating myself, Dr. Lopkin, but it won't be the first time. I told you when it was the Carter administration and Reagan was beginning to come after him in terms of, running for president. And do you know what the national debt was in 1979?
I do not.
I'll tell you, $500 billion. That's like a rounding error. 29 trillion.
That's the interest on our debt now.
In a minute. Yeah, exactly. 29 trillion. We just passed this infrastructure. How incompetent can you be? I mean, yeah, of course you're going to get inflation. And to that note, inflation is now at a 20-year high. This cannot go on forever. The Weimar Republic, was a reality, and it could be a reality today.
Yeah, inflation has been going up partially because of the reopening, partially because of a lack of supply when things were closed down, but
No question.
partially because of ridiculous government spending. And now, this budget that is about to be passed with no Republican votes, that put spending ridiculous. Prior to this budget, I was saying the last budget that Trump passed was the worst budget we've ever had. This puts that to shame. There is so much pork spending on it. And what's really bad is that, they're pushing it as an infrastructure bill. They're pushing it as an infrastructure bill. Something along the lines of 25% of it is actually infrastructure. 75% has nothing to do with infrastructure. It's a liberal wish list.
Yeah, wait till the reconciled bill comes. Although Trey Gowdy did say on a broadcast he doesn't think that when it's reconciled in Congress that the Senate will reaffirm it.
I doubt it, because the $1 trillion, the $1 trillion one that just passed, if I'm remembering the number right, it actually passed with 63 votes. So that was 13 Republicans that supported this. And there's a lot of good in it. However, once they reconcile it with this, they're going to have every Democrat on board. And there's a lot in this bill that there's a couple of Democrats in Senate that they've already said they won't vote for it.
We'll see how that goes. Maybe it was a good opportunity for Biden to take a victory lap with his victory in the Senate. We'll see how it works out after the whole thing is done. Now, I know that we'll probably want to close on this, or we have two things left. That Trump was accused of being a fascist, among other, the whole list. He was accused of everything. And some of it was his own fault, let's be honest, right? Because he was obnoxious. But Biden, and one of the things he was accused of is being a fascist. However, it looks like Biden is not really going, conducting himself in the way of proper government either, is he?
No, the Biden administration has literally just crossed the boundaries into fascism. And what we're referring to is the extension of the moratorium on evictions that Biden put through as an executive order. The courts told the Biden administration before he did this, that he did not have the ability or the power to do this. Nancy Pelosi came out and said, this is something that has to be done by the Congress. The president does not have the power to act. The Biden administration completely ignored this and illegally is trying to enforce a moratorium on evictions. Obviously,
can I interject one thing on that? Because you had a good point in our prep. Is everyone thinks, oh, who cares? They're landlords, whatever. But in actuality, a lot of them are mom and pop businesses that don't have the capabilities to have, high-priced lawyers. They're really essentially screwed if someone defaults on their rent, correct?
Yes, they are. The people who are being screwed over by this are people that own a home, are paying a mortgage, but they say they own a 2-family or a 3-family house. They live in that house, but they rely on those renters to help them meet the mortgage. Well, guess what? They can't force the renters to pay at this point, but they still have to pay the mortgage. They still have to pay the property taxes, and they are having problems, and there's no relief for them.
No, and it also makes no sense when you have jobs going begging. You have to wonder what the real motivation is, because there's the pandemic. Yes, there's still out there. It's still a huge concern, but in terms of the initial economic shock, a lot of that has faded, correct? It's most people have job opportunities. Am I not correct?
Most people have job opportunities, and the other problem is that people are taking advantage of this. There was a woman that was interviewed on Fox this morning. She is a landlord in the situation that I just explained. She relies on that rental income to make the mortgage and the property taxes. Her tenant has refused to pay rent since February 2020, when the moratorium went into effect. Now, she has been in contact with his employer. He has had a job for this entire time. He's been getting his paycheck and using the moratorium as an excuse not to pay his rent.
And I'm sure there's other examples out there. Now, let's be honest. When we first, was enacted, it made a lot of sense. People were, who knew how this thing was going to unfold? If people were in the restaurant, they didn't have jobs. So initially, I thought it was probably a good thing. But, like a lot of things in government, they have a hard time dying, correct?
The problem with the moratorium was the same problem with just about every other government program, in that when they pass it, they're more concerned about passing it quickly, so they just hit the broad strokes. All they had to do was insert a line in the bill that said you could only take advantage of the moratorium if you were out of work. That was all they had to do to make this better. And, let's face it, the government is making a big deal about, we have to protect these renters. Well, how about putting a moratorium on property taxes? State governments, local governments can do that very easily. But have you ever heard a government say, oh, yes, we're going to give you a break on taxes?
No, it's always good. It's like we've always talked about it. Do as I say, not as I do. Last topic area. I know that Biden took his victory lap the other day, but over the last, pretty 3-4 weeks, it's kind of like almost like an invisible government. You don't see. Camilla has been put out on the pasture for a while for obvious reasons.
Yeah, they haven't let Camilla make public appearances since she made her trip to the border and embarrassed everybody.
Yes, and I think her political viability is more than within question. But then Biden it's really interesting because, Trump, he was out there ad nauseum. To his detriment. It was like, please just go away and shut up. These guys are nowhere to be seen.
No, they've been in hiding. They don't want you to see Biden. And the reason I believe that they don't want you to see Biden is because when he does come out, he says the most asinine things, such as yesterday, his comment about Andrew Cuomo did one hell of a job.
I love that one. I'm glad you mentioned it.
He killed 15,000 seniors. That's a hell of a job.
That's like Captain Smith in the Titanic is a hell of a navigator.
Exactly.
Unbelievable. Well, that concludes another edition. I love that comment because I was listening to that. I'm going, what? Not only the nursing home scandal and tragedy, but basically there's more people leaving New York than a rock concert. Great job, Mr. Cuomo.
Yeah,
but that was
something else also that he had mentioned how good New York's infrastructure is. Now, I don't know how many of our listeners have been to New York, but the infrastructure has gone to hell.
Interesting. Well, great show. Thank all our listeners, and we can be reached or accessed through almost every outlet. Correct?
That's right. You can find us every week at the Carnivore Radio website. You can find us at xvadio.com/podcasts, on the Apple Podcasts app, Google Podcasts app, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Audible. You can find us on social media and YouTube when they don't pull down podcasts willy-nilly, and wherever you find podcasts.
Thank you, Dr. Lopkin, and thank our listeners. We'll be back next week.
We'll see you then.